Imagine dedicating 17 years to a company building everything from scratch only to be fired without a single warning. My boss thought they could discard me like trash, but they didn't know I held the secret that could topple their entire corrupt system. From the shock of losing my job, I turned betrayal into a spectacular victory. Watch to the end to witness a gripping journey from darkness to justice, a high-stakes showdown that will leave you stunned. Lucas, after 17 years, we're eliminating your position, my boss said, his voice cold. Clear your desk by the end of the day. I'm Lucas Bennett, 54 years old, and until that Monday morning I was a senior systems analyst at Vertex Technologies in Cleveland, Ohio. For nearly 2 decades, I was the backbone of the IT department. From the days of dial-up connections to cloud transitions, 3 CEOs came and went, while I stayed training every new hire, recovering every lost file, working weekends and holidays without asking for promotions or praise. So when Gavin called me into his office with Clara from HR already seated, their eyes hard as stone, I knew before he opened his mouth. The air had been tense for weeks, as if the whole building was holding its breath waiting for a storm. I said I understand completely, nodding once I walked out without another word. No anger, no begging, just quiet acceptance. Back at my desk, I saw younger employees glance at me, then quickly look down at their screens. News spreads like wildfire. Most of them were coders I'd trained, good young folks, but they didn't know how the system was really built or how the old architecture worked. None of them could navigate the custom software I'd written or access the admin credentials buried 3 layers deep in the system. I began packing my personal items methodically. Family photos, the coffee mug my son Liam made in high school, the tiny cactus that miraculously survived 17 years under fluorescent lights, like a symbol of my endurance. Lila from marketing stopped by, her face tight with worry. Lucas, I just heard. This is insane. You practically built this place. I shrugged, companies changing direction. But no warning after everything you've done. Her voice rose, drawing looks from nearby desks. A few people pausing their typing to glance over. It's fine, I said softly. Really? It wasn't fine, but I wasn't about to make a scene. I'd seen the looks from colleagues' curiosity mixed with pity, and I knew I had to stay calm. As I left, Gavin stepped out of his office to watch me go. No goodbye. No handshake, just making sure I was really leaving. I walked down the hallway, my shoes echoing on the tile each step, a reminder that this wasn't the end. What none of them had paid attention to all those years was that I'd become the most essential person in the building. Not because I was brilliant, but because I was careful. I documented everything, set up secure audit protocols years ago to track unauthorized access at the legal team's request. During an old scandal, I kept copies too. In my car, I sat for a moment staring at the 12-story building where I'd spent most of my life, sunlight glinting off the windshield like a challenge to act. The security badge I'd just turned in had been renewed 16 times. I started the car and drove home. They had no idea how interesting Wednesday would be. I'd been with Vertex since it was just 2 floors in an industrial park, starting when my daughter Ava was in kindergarten. Now she's finishing her graduate program. The company grew, and I grew with it. I turned down offers from competitors because loyalty mattered to me. My wife Julia used to joke that the servers were my second family, and she wasn't entirely wrong. I'd spent long nights in the server room fixing crashes, while the company slept the hum of cooling fans like a lullaby. I knew every system, every workaround, every backdoor fix for problems the C-suite didn't even know existed. The infrastructure I built survived 3 acquisitions and countless executive initiatives that management hyped up and abandoned months later. Gavin became my boss 5 years ago, a young MBA type who called our department IT resources instead of people. He had ideas about optimization, efficiency, digital transformation, buzzwords that usually meant doing more with less. At first, I tried to help him understand our system, the complexity beneath years of development and adaptation. We need to future-proof, he'd say, in meetings looking past me. 6 months ago, he brought in a consultant named Nolan Harper. Expensive suits, firm handshake, a Stanford degree flashing on his LinkedIn. I'd seen guys like Nolan before, big talkers, small doers, and I knew he wasn't here to improve, but to disrupt. They huddled in meeting rooms, whispering whenever I passed by. 3 months ago, I noticed my access quietly changed. Not overtly, just small tweaks to admin controls like someone hoped I wouldn't notice. I could have complained, but instead I watched, documented. "You've seemed distracted lately," Julia said one evening as we sat on our porch, the faint moonlight glowing on the yard, Cleveland's fall air crisp. "Everything okay at work?" I nodded, sipping my beer. "Just changes nothing. I haven't seen before, but this felt different. I was excluded from meetings, emails about system upgrades stopped coming to me. Projects I'd normally handle were assigned to younger staff. Then I found a company-wide memo about a modernization initiative not shared with me like a stealth knife. I'd been out of the loop for a while. It outlined restructuring the entire IT department under new leadership. Nolan Harper. My position wasn't even on the org chart. That same day, I found something else. While running routine security checks, a background task no one paid attention to anymore, I spotted anomalies in the financial software. Periodic transfers to a vendor. I didn't recognize Summit Sync Solutions. A quick search showed it was registered last year. Its business address, a UPS store. The payment started small but grew monthly. I didn't say anything, just logged it, copied the records, and kept watching. I began tracking transactions nightly, cross-referencing them with system history, feeling like a hunter following tracks in the dark. Sometimes the quiet guy in the corner sees everything precisely because everyone thinks he sees nothing. The morning after my firing, I sat in my home office staring at my personal laptop. No alarm to wake me, no commute waiting, just silence and the weight of what had happened. Julia brought me coffee, setting it beside me without a word. After 19 years of marriage, she knew when I needed space. "I'm heading to the grocery store," she said after a moment. "Need anything?" I shook my head. When she left, I unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a USB drive, one of several I kept secure. Company policy strictly forbade taking data off-site. But years ago, when the legal team needed audit systems to track internal threats, I'd requested off-site backups. They agreed, then promptly forgot about it. I plugged in the drive and reviewed the files, internal emails, meeting minutes. I shouldn't have had access to financial records no regular employee would ever see. There it was, the full history of payments to Summit Sync Solutions, nearly $1.8 million over 18 months. The approval chain led straight to the CFO, Elliot Ramsey. I dug deeper, cross-referencing dates and figures until the pattern emerged. The payments perfectly matched a series of software license renewals the company used, but the amounts were inflated sometimes by 15%, sometimes 20%. Small enough to avoid immediate notice, large enough to add up, I checked Summit Sync Solutions business registration. The owner was Margaret Ramsey. A quick social media search confirmed what I suspected: Elliot's sister. They were siphoning company money through fake invoices on legitimate expenses. I leaned back in my chair. Something stirring inside me. Not quite anger, but a cold, sharp clarity, keener than ever. For 17 years I'd solved problems, fixed systems, protected data. I was the reliable guy, always there without making waves, and they tossed me aside like outdated hardware. My phone buzzed with a text from Tara, a young analyst I'd mentored for 2 years. Sorry about yesterday. It's so unfair what they did. Harper's already moved into your old office. I set the phone down, didn't reply. The pieces were falling into place. Gavin and the CFO needed me gone before anyone connected the dots. They probably thought the evidence would vanish with me, that I was just an old tech guy who didn't understand modern finance. I opened my email and started drafting to the board, then stopped my finger hovering over Send To, direct too easily dismissed as the bitter accusations of a fired employee. I needed leverage precision, a way to expose the fraud that couldn't be ignored or covered up. I deleted the draft and began planning. Wednesday was the board meeting where quarterly financials would be presented. Bonuses would be approved. Perfect timing. I closed my laptop and walked to the living room window, looking out at the neighborhood where we raised Ava and Liam built our life. For the first time since yesterday, I smiled not out of joy, but because I knew I was about to beat them at their own game. Wednesday morning, I sat in my car across from Vertex headquarters watching employees stream through the revolving doors. On the passenger seat was my laptop logged into an email account I'd created years ago for security tests, designed to look like it came from the company domain, but untracked in the main directory. I'd tested this account last night, ensuring it still worked ready to deliver the first strike. At exactly 9:15 a.m., I made my first move in email to Gavin's subject line. Financial irregularities. Urgent review required, with a basic summary of what I'd found about the Summit Sync payments. I included just enough detail to be credible, but held back the sister connection. If Gavin was involved, he'd panic. If not, he'd investigate. Either way, I'd learn more. By 9:45, my phone rang Gavin's number. I let it go to voicemail. His message was curt. "Lucas, we need to talk about your email immediately. Call me back now." I didn't call. Instead, I drove to a coffee shop. The smell of roasted beans mixing with the grind of the espresso machine opened my laptop and waited. At 10:30, another email came from Clara in HR. "Mr. Bennett, we've received concerning information from you that may violate your severance agreement. Please cease contacting Vertex employees and be reminded of your confidentiality obligations. Further communication may lead to legal action." So they were going with threats, dismissal, isolation. I hadn't signed any severance agreement. At noon, I went to the bank and opened a safe deposit box. Inside was an older backup, but it held critical information I didn't keep on my regular drives. Among the files was the original security protocol I'd designed, logging who had access to which systems and when changes were made. The records showed Elliot Ramsey had requested expanded access to the financial approval system 18 months ago, right when the Summit Sync payments started. Back home, I had 3 missed calls: Gavin, Clara, and now Nolan Harper. I hadn't expected him to get involved so fast. Interesting. I checked my personal email, found a message from Tara, marked urgent. "Lucas, they're saying you sent a crazy email about financial fraud. Harper called an emergency meeting. People are freaking out. They're wiping your access, even old data. We need to talk. What's going on?" "Poor kid caught in the crossfire," I replied briefly. "Stay out of it, Tara. Just watch." At 3 p.m., the house phone rang, a number I rarely used for work. I picked up but didn't speak. "Lucas, it's Elliot Ramsey." His voice was calm, controlled. "We should discuss your concerns. I think there's a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I asked silence. Then he said, "Transitions are often difficult. If you have questions about company finances, there are proper channels like the board." I cut him off quietly. "Then the board doesn't need to be bothered with operational details. Why don't we meet tomorrow? Just you and me. We can sort this out." "Sorry, I'm busy tomorrow, I said. Besides, I think the board will be very interested in Summit Sync Solutions and your sister. His sharp intake of breath told me everything. You're making a serious mistake, he said finally. We can do this right. A generous severance package, a reference letter, whatever you need. Goodbye, Elliot, I said and hung up inside. I felt a cold certainty they'd underestimated me and now they'd pay. Within 10 minutes, Clara emailed again. Suddenly, my severance offer had doubled with a clause demanding complete confidentiality about all company matters. They were panicking, but still thought they were dealing with a simple extortion attempt. They had no idea what was coming. Thursday morning, I woke with clarity. I'd spent the night reviewing years of data connecting dots I'd previously overlooked, like a cryptographer piecing together a larger picture. The Summit Sync scam wasn't Elliot's first creative accounting project. 3 years ago, right after he became CFO, another pattern emerged: consulting fees to a company called Crestview Advisors. Different name, same game, inflated invoices for services partially performed or not at all. I traced Crestview's registration. It was owned by Catherine Ramsey Elliott's wife. This woman was apparently the director of a company with no website, no employees, and only a virtual office address. But the bigger revelation came when I checked the archived email repository. Gavin didn't just know about these arrangements. He facilitated them. In return, his department got budget increases while others were cut. He'd been brought in specifically because the previous director started asking about IT spending. Even Nolan Harper was involved. His consulting firm was hired through an irregular process, bypassing normal procurement channels. His real role wasn't modernizing IT. It was removing the one person who could spot the financial pattern: me. The scheme was elegant in its simplicity: create a legitimate vendor, approve inflated payments, and pocket the difference. Because actual services were provided just at a higher cost, auditors looking for completely fake expenses would miss it. Over 3 years, they'd siphoned off nearly $3 million. I compiled everything into a comprehensive report, spreadsheets showing the escalation pattern, business registrations, linking the companies to Elliott's family email exchanges, proving Gavin's knowledge and involvement. Then I did something they wouldn't expect. I reached out to Victor Tran, a board member I'd worked with years ago on security implementations. He was semi-retired now, but still attended quarterly meetings. Lucas Bennett, he said, answering on the second ring. Been a while. Heard you left Vertex. Not by choice, I replied. Victor, I need 15 minutes of your time. It's important. Silence then. This about Elliot and Gavin huddling, looking stressed. Yesterday's board meeting was tense. Could be. He chuckled softly. Always thought you knew where the bodies were buried. Where do we meet? An hour later, we sat in a park 3 miles from headquarters, autumn wind rustling the leaves. I handed him a sealed envelope containing a printed summary and a USB drive. Everything's in there, I said: dates, amounts, connections. I don't want my old job back. I don't want money. I just want the right people to know. Victor looked at me. Why me? Because you actually read the audit reports. I saw you in meetings asking questions. He nodded slowly. There's an emergency board session tomorrow, reviewing the finance committee. Good timing, Lucas, he said, slipping the envelope into his coat. If this checks out, there'll be serious consequences. I'm counting on it. Back in my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Julia. Someone named Nolan Harper came by the house looking for you. Said it was urgent. I told him you weren't here. They were desperate. Good. That afternoon, I got 2 job offers from rival companies, both for higher roles than my old one with big signing bonuses. Word of my availability had spread. I set them aside for now. This wasn't about finding a new job. It was about finishing what they started. That night, I sat in my home office. the desk lamp casting light on my laptop, double-checking every detail of the report. I thought about the years of dedication, the sleepless nights fixing systems, and how they thought I'd quietly disappear. I shook my head, a cold smile forming. They'd picked the wrong guy to cross, using login credentials that should have been revoked but weren't sloppy. IT management. Nolan, I accessed the company email server one last time, scheduling a message to every board member for 8 a.m. tomorrow. Before approving Q2 bonuses, read this. Attached was my full report. Friday morning was clear and bright. I sat on our porch with coffee watching the neighborhood wake up. No alarm, no commute, just waiting. At exactly 8:00 a.m., my scheduled email delivered its payload to the board members. By 8:17, my phone started ringing unknown numbers. Probably board assistants trying to reach me. I let them all go to voicemail. At 9:00 a.m., the Finance Committee's emergency meeting began. Victor Tran would be there with my documents, watching reactions as the email was discovered and discussed. At 9:32, Tara texted, "Police are here. Ramsey and Gavin are being questioned in the boardroom. Harper looks like he's about to be sick." "What did you do?" I didn't reply. Everything was unfolding as expected. I pictured the chaos in the boardroom, the panicked whispers among staff, Gavin's terrified look as he realized it was all collapsing. At 10:00 a.m., Vertex's general counsel called. I answered this one, unlike the others. "Mr. Bennett, this is Evelyn Porter from legal. We need you to come in immediately to discuss the information you sent the board." "I'm available by phone," I replied. "This really needs to be in person." "No need." I cut in calm. "Everything I know is in the report. Everything I have is backed up in multiple secure locations. If anything happens to me or my family, copies will go to the SEC, IRS, and 3 news outlets." Silence. "Mr. Bennett," she said finally, her voice careful. "The board is taking this very seriously. They've placed several executives on administrative leave pending investigation. They'd appreciate your cooperation. I've cooperated fully by providing a complete file. My part's done." After she hung up, I drove to a diner 20 miles outside Cleveland, a cozy place with the smell of fresh bread and the clink of cutlery. I wanted to be far from any fallout today. Over lunch, news started hitting local business sites. Vertex Technologies, executives under investigation for financial irregularities. No names yet, but they'd come soon. At 2 p.m., Victor Tran called. "That was a bloodbath," he said straight off. "Elliot confessed when we confronted him with your evidence, tried to cut a deal, claimed Gavin pressured him. Gavin's denying everything. Harper says he was just a consultant who didn't know the finances. The board's not buying it. We've suspended all 3 pending further investigation. The money forensic accountants start Monday. Initial estimate is at least $4.5 million diverted over 3 years, maybe more." I nodded to myself, a cold satisfaction rising. "Close to my calculations. The board wants to talk to you." Victor continued about coming back, "Not just to your old role. They're creating a new chief security officer position, reporting directly to the board. I'd anticipated this possibility but was still surprised. I'll think about it," I said. That evening, I told Julia everything. She listened without interrupting, her eyes, gentle but sharp, then asked, "What do you want to do?" Good question. The revenge part was done. The people who pushed me out were being pushed out, possibly facing criminal charges. Justice had been served cold and precise. But going back to Vertex meant stepping back into a place that discarded me after 17 years of dedication. Could I do that? Did I want to? I need time to decide, I said finally. That night, I opened my long-dormant LinkedIn and posted, "Don't burn bridges. Let them collapse under the weight of greed." Within minutes, old colleagues started reaching out, messages flooding in like a tide. The news was spreading. The quiet tech guy had taken down 3 executives without raising his voice. By Monday, everyone would know exactly who they'd underestimated. Monday morning, I walked into Vertex headquarters wearing a suit I hadn't used in years. The security guard, a middle-aged man I'd chatted with about baseball, looked stunned, then quickly printed a visitor badge. "Welcome back, Mr. Bennett," he said, his voice carrying a new respect, like he knew what I'd done. The elevator ride to the executive floor was quiet. I'd never had reason to come up here before. Now I was expected in the boardroom. 10 board members sat around a polished wooden table, the air heavy like before a verdict. Victor Tran gave a slight nod as I entered, a discreet smile on his lips. The interim CEO previously, the COO, looked uncomfortable, her eyes avoiding mine. "Mr. Bennett," she began, "thank you for coming. The situation you've brought to light is unprecedented." I stood there silent, my gaze sweeping across each face in the room, waiting to hear what they'd say. "The extent of the fraud appears worse than your initial report," she continued. "The forensic team has identified nearly $5.2 million diverted. Criminal charges are being prepared." I kept waiting, saying nothing, feeling like a warrior bracing for the final battle. Victor cleared his throat. "Lucas, the board has unanimously agreed to create a new executive position, Chief Information Security Officer with full authority, reporting directly to the board. We'd like to offer you this role." I placed a folder on the table. "These are my terms," I said. "Non-negotiable." The CEO opened it, scanned quickly. Her eyebrows rose. "Full audit authority over all departments, independent budget veto power over financial tech decisions." I nodded once. "This is highly unusual," she said. "So is $5.2 million in fraud," I replied. "That happened because no one was watching. Now there will be." The room fell silent, the air thick like before a storm. "You have until noon," I said, standing. "I have other offers." As I turned to leave, Victor asked, "Did you plan this from the start?" "Lucas?" I paused at the door, looking back at him. My gaze calm but sharp. I didn't plan to be fired after 17 years. Everything after that was just me doing what I've always done, identifying system vulnerabilities and implementing appropriate security measures. I walked out, my footsteps echoing in the hallway, feeling like I'd just defeated an invisible enemy. At exactly 11:47, they called. They accepted every term. 6 months later, I sat in my new corner office looking out over Cleveland's skyline, reviewing security protocols for the next quarter. The space was large with big windows, a far cry from my old cramped cubicle. Elliot Ramsey had pleaded guilty to multiple fraud charges. In exchange for cooperation, he got a reduced sentence, still significant. Gavin was fighting the charges, insisting he knew nothing of the scheme, despite the evidence Nolan Harper had fled to Brazil, but was facing extradition. The money had been recovered, mostly enough to keep the company from serious financial harm. My old team now reported to me, but I'd promoted Tara to manage daily operations. She had potential, just needed someone to see it, and I wanted to ensure she wasn't treated like I'd been. A knock at the door caught my attention. Julia stood there, smiling, a light scarf around her shoulders, her eyes as gentle as the day we met. "Ready for lunch?" she asked. I nodded, grabbed my coat. As we passed through the IT department, conversations hushed not out of fear, but respect. These people knew what had happened, knew I could have destroyed the company instead of saving it. A few younger ones nodded in greeting, their eyes holding a kind of awe, like I was a living legend. In the elevator, Julia took my hand, her fingers warm, steady, happy. I considered the question, my gaze drifting to the elevator's number panel. The anger that fueled me in those early days after the firing had faded. What remained wasn't quite happiness, but satisfaction, completion. "I'm good," I said, outside. October's sun was warm on my face as we walked to a nearby restaurant, leaves crunching underfoot like a victory song. My phone buzzed with a text from Victor Tran board, approved the security budget increase, unanimous vote. I smiled faintly, a sense of fulfillment spreading. No arguments, no questions, just trust. Julia noticed my expression. "What's that?" "Nothing," I said, pocketing my phone. "Just thinking about bridges. Some collapse under the weight of greed. Others, when repaired, become stronger than ever. I'd built the right bridge this time, and it was sturdier than anything they'd ever imagined." But the story didn't stop there. A week later, I got an email from a former employee, Sam, who'd worked under me before moving to a rival company. "Heard you shook up Vertex," he wrote. "If you're interested, I've got a team here that could use someone like you. Leadership role, not just tech." I smiled. Left the email unanswered. I wasn't in a rush. For now I had options, not just to survive, but to shape the future on my terms. I also started meeting with old colleagues, people who'd worked alongside me in Vertex's early days. They talked about how the company had changed, how loyalty was forgotten, and how my story inspired them to stand up against injustice. One, Clara from finance, revealed she'd started an internal audit after hearing about the case, uncovering additional minor irregularities the forensic team missed. "You paved the way," she said, her eyes bright. I nodded, feeling a quiet pride, not just for my victory, but for sparking change. One evening, I sat with Julia on our porch, moonlight illuminating the yard again. "You did something no one expected," she said, her voice soft but firm. "What's next?" I sipped my beer, looking up at the starry sky. "Keep building bridges," I said. "But this time for us." She smiled, squeezing my hand tighter, and in that moment I knew I hadn't just reclaimed justice, but found a new purpose. Hey everyone, thanks for watching this dramatic journey from betrayal to triumph. If Lucas's story of resilience inspired you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. Drop a comment. Have you ever faced workplace injustice and come out stronger? I want to hear your stories. Share this video with anyone who needs a push to fight back. See you in the next one.